Well, now I'd like to turn to another great model, Paul Strick. Paul's going to talk to us about his track plan. So, Paul, welcome.
Welcome, and I am unmuted. Good, so I don't have to worry about that one. I'm looking forward to showing this tonight and next time. Let me go ahead and pop up the PowerPoint presentation here. Email address is there for anybody who wants to follow up with me later. Had a lot of good design help from some of the guys here in the Atlanta area that are part of the Piedmont division of NMRA, Kruheimer, Dave Yeager. And with COVID, we did largely virtual tours this last fall. And the one from my layout can be seen if you go on YouTube and Google Piedmont Pilgrimage, then my name and the year 2021. There's one in 2020 as well, but the 2021 one I think was a nicer job. So tonight we'll do part one of some things I learned designing a good freight classification yard. I had some good help from the people at the LD SIG group and NMRA, and good help from a number of people in our local division. And a little trivia question here. Which way should the yard engine face, east or west? We'll come back to a hint and the answer to that one later. Some design yard options for those of you that are looking at perhaps moving and doing another yard as I did 10 years ago. And my freight yard in this house is a whole lot better than it was 10 years ago. You got your simple ladder that can look like this. You've got a compound ladder where you've got multiple turnouts coming off of one, like this one. And as we'll see, you're going to want to have a drill track where your yard switcher can pull back a cut of cars and then distribute them onto one of the classification tracks. The arrival and departure tracks aren't on in this picture. Joe Nichols Sr. here in Atlanta is one of the earliest MMRs. I think his number is 73. And he's got a lovely, lovely stub-ended freight yard that also slopes downhill past the hump, so that when he uncouples, the car will roll down most of the time to the other end to make more room. Feather ladder. I don't know if it's free tag or fry tag. My apologies to the fellow who created it if I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's another way of being able to pull cars off the main down to the drill track and then distributing them on the classification tracks. One advantage of this one is that the Caboose Track is going to be in the right place, so you don't have to have a runaround that you'll see on my freight yard. Arrival and departure tracks. You want to make sure that if you only have if you're only coming in from one direction, you don't want the crossover into the arrival and departure tracks to be back here, because the drill track is going to be pulling cars off of this and putting them down here. So you want to make sure that the engine that comes in is not going to be interfering with any of the classification work that's happening down here. Can you reach it? Rule of thumb, what I think about 36 inches for a decent reach. So make sure that from your aisle back as far as you need to go, that you can reach to be able to get things. Another version of some runarounds. This is an example of not a good place because the yard switcher is going to be coming down here, and then it can't, if it backs into this and the car is in front of it, there's nothing it can do to get itself out, not without a runaround track. One sample yard with a caboose track here with entry on both ends, so that depending upon which way an engine is headed out, in case it's going either east or west, the yard switcher can pick it up from the correct end to attach it to the existing train that it's putting together. Double track main line, crossovers on both ends for trains coming in. My original design, I'll show you in a minute, just had one arrival and departure track. And some of my colleagues wisely suggested me to increase that to 3. Here's the hint for which way that engine faces, paying attention to the fellow down here. And the answer, east. So the engineer can see the conductor or foreman's hand signals. Where are you going to put your turnout throws if you're doing manual throws? They're going to be on this side so that the conductor who's there throwing the turnouts, if it's a manual throw, will be able to see the engineer coming along. But on a layout, it's going to be easier for you if they're close to the aisle. George Bloodworth's layout has the aisle over here to the left, and it's a nice short reach to be able to get to these. I'll give you a couple of other pictures. Turnout throws are here, so it's easy to be able to reach them from the aisle. Not where you'd want it to be if this were a prototype layout because of what I said a minute ago. And then one other shot looking at the turnouts on the aisle side. Space gained. If you look at the angle of things, starting at the top, all of these have a number 6 turnout for getting started. The angle here is only 9.5 degrees from the main line to the yard line here. But to be able to get the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classification tracks, it's going to take you, move that a little bit over, it's going to take you 6 feet 3 inches to be able to do that. By adding a short curve off the main line before you get to the first classification track, you can change the angle some and you save yourself 15 inches. For a 10-inch 40-foot boxcar, that's going to give you 1.5 cars more there. If you do compound ladder, you shrink down where your early ones can be from 5 feet down to 4.4 feet 2 inches, and you've got an extra 2 feet for things. And then lastly, if you start with a major curve instead of coming in at a straight line, you can shrink that down even more to having more space down here. This is one of the times that I miss being face-to-face where people can do Q&A just by sticking up a hand, because I can only see 4 people here on the side. So Jim, if you see somebody put something in the chat box that I'm not seeing, feel free to interrupt me.
Okay.
A quick tangent here. When I moved to my current house 10 years ago, I learned about Lynn Westcott's lightweight design that is so much better. Uses 1x4s with a 1x2 on the top. Nail gun, if you've got one, comes in handy for securing the 1x2 on top. It's not going to slide anywhere. And then above that, perpendicular to it, the 1x4 and the 1x2, all the screws come from underneath into the 1/2-inch plywood that sits on top. If you ever need to move the joist because of a turnout, a tortoise motor that you want to position somewhere, all you have to do is unscrew the screw under here and the one on the other end, and you can slide that board over to be able to put the joist where it doesn't get in the way. These legs are just 2x2s with a 1x2 X member for strength and a 1x2 across the bottom. It also makes it easy if you want to go 3-dimensional, because on the end of my yard, I've got West Newton modeled, and it's easy to put in some risers to bring things up. There's another version of it This one is missing the 1x2s on the top. They hadn't been put in yet when that picture was taken. So 10 Commandments for Freight Yards, designed by Craig Bisgeier. My apologies for pronunciation. Don't foul the main line. And I'll give you pictures here in a minute. Provide a dedicated track lead or drill track. Don't foul the yard lead. Have arrival and departure tracks. The trains can get off the main line to be worked on. Provide a caboose track. Provide a runaround. We'll see why that's important. Make sure you can reach everything. Provide auxiliary yard tracks for things like a repair and place track, the RIP track, the ash dump track if you're running steam engines, and a coal dump track if you're running the steam. Don't overcrowd the yard. And lastly, make it easy to run. Have fun with it. So let's take a look. Again, not fouling the main line. If you put a crossover here, you're going to have problems with the yard switcher being able to pull cars off the train that's arrived and moving them into the classification tracks. This is a schematic on any rail of my freight yard here. Drill track is up here on the left. Arrival and departure. Sorry, the yard entry on the left side is here. And on the right side, I've got a three-way turnout. I know it's not prototypical, but it's my layout. Three-way turnout that comes back then to the main lines and can cross over to either main line, depending upon which way things are coming. We'll see more of that later. Overhead view, the two main lines come around 48-inch in the minimum radius inside. And the drill track up here, I love having a long track for the drill track. I can run, I think it's either 10 or 12 40-foot box cars from the end of that drill track all the way down here to from the arrival and departure tracks or the classification tracks. So you can pull a nice long cut of cars. And again, there's the drill track showing the space for that. Number 3, and the top of my screen hides some of what's up there. Thou shalt not foul the yard lead. Boxcar is a little too close there, so other lines can't get out. When I started back in 2014, I didn't know how to use the AnyRail software. And initially, I just had the one arrival and departure track and a bunch of classification tracks. And friends quickly said, no, give yourself at least 3 arrival and departure tracks. Because you got one train coming in, you got one you're going to be dismantling, another one you're putting together. So you really want to have at least 3. And early on, I thought I would have the 2 main lines coming across the back and allow exit from the yard. I got rid of that idea quickly. Not good. So here's the sketch, increasing it to 3 arrival and departure tracks. Originally, I was going to have the icing track over here, so that it was much easier for the yard switcher to push a cut of cars in to the ice house and then back them out and reassemble them on the departure tracks. But that cost me 2 classification tracks. So later on, I moved it over here and see what happens with that. There's the 3 arrival and departure tracks, the 2 main lines. You can't see it in this picture, but from here down to here, I let the main lines drop down some because I wanted to add a little more 3-dimensional quality to this huge flat section. Providing a caboose track with a runaround. because I have it on the wrong end of the yard, it means that if the yard switcher picks up a caboose from the end of the train, backs up and comes down here with it to drop it off in here, it's on the wrong end of the caboose. So it has to have enough space to be able to back up and then run around to be able to get back out. Alternatively, we'll see later, there's another runaround track. This one and this one are a longer runaround track where the yard switcher could come around to the other end of the caboose that way. And again, the runaround, that's my first draft with a bunch of short tracks here that I realized were not going to be useful for much of anything. So in a later design, I changed how that runaround goes so that you can pull a cut of cars out of the arrival and departure tracks and move up here. If the caboose needs to, if the yard switcher is pulling a caboose, he could drop it off here. He could drop the caboose here, come around the runaround track and pick it up from the other side and then push it into the caboose track. The final design for the runarounds, again, the ice house got moved over here on the left, which gave me 6 classification tracks. And there's a major runaround track that you see here. And there's a short one in the caboose track area. There's another one back here that's a little harder to see. Let me move this out of the way. Between track 6 and track 5, there's a turnout that brings you over to 5 and one that takes you back to 6. So that when he's pulling cars out of the ice house, he can pull them here and then uncouple and use the runaround track to come around and pick them up to put them back on the departure track. Not the best, but I can work with it. Commandment number 7, thou shalt be able to reach everything. Even with an 18-inch radius, I don't think it'd be easy to reach stuff on the far side of this one. So not going to model that, but it's a fascinating service yard, freight yard. Auxiliary tracks. Jim, how am I doing on time? I forgot to notice when I started. I got about 5 minutes left tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Auxiliary yard tracks. We've got the icing track along here. You've got the rip track next to it, the caboose track with the runaround. There's an ash dump pit here for steam engines coming in. They can get rid of their ashes in the dump, and then a hopper car can come and pick up the ashes here. Next over, you've got the outbound track to provide water and coal for a steam engine. You've got a coal track to be able to drop coal to be loaded up into the tower. Got 2 diesel shed tracks and the drill track over here. Got 5 tracks for engines outside the roundhouse and 3 inside. I don't have, it is a motorized turntable, but I didn't pay for the computer electronics that would stop it exactly where you wanted it to. So it takes a little practice to get it to stop right quite where you want it to be. Another view from the rip track, the caboose track, and the like. One bound. Originally, I had either 3 or 4 tracks that headed into the roundhouse, and realized I really only needed 2. One for the inbound to drop the ashes if I'm running steam, and one for the outbound for the steam engines to pick up water and coal. Rule of thumb, don't occupy more than 50% of the yard space. Things get a little too crowded. And a couple of dimensional things. Down here, you've got 5.5 feet. Ultimately, this 2-foot 2-inch one on this end increased to 3 feet because of a change that I made that you'll see in the last picture here. And again, a 24-inch minimum radius and 27 on the outer main line. That was 2014 over here. And I got rid of the 2 industrial plants. And with my friend David Yeager's advice, we rounded the end of the table to avoid bumps, and it curves down around here. If I move this over for a minute, you can see how it curves around here. And it gives me a lot more activity to model with the town that I grew up in, West Newton, Massachusetts, just west of Boston. The original plan called for both main lines coming along here, with one of them going behind these 4 buildings. But I realized that you can't have a runaround track if you're hiding one track behind it. So now both main lines come in front, and there's a runaround track from here on the left end over here to the right, so that if an engine needs to get on the other end of the freight car, it can do so. These 2 head through the wall to a quarry, a coal mine, and a helix. The one on the right here heads under South Station and heads north going up through New England. That's the quick version tonight. Next week, with 15 minutes, I'll tackle the Rigby yard that I built on the other end of the layout, which has some design challenges of its own because of the smaller space. Any questions before I let go of Mike here?
Paul, I really do appreciate you being here tonight. I think you covered it beautifully.